Mr. McIntosh, you're very welcome to the committee room at the Royal Dublin Golf Club.
Thank you for having me again, Shane.
Not a problem. We're quite unusually recording this face-to-face. This is the ideal excuse to give my Zoom PodTrack P4 its first adventure into the wild. For those that are listening, a Zoom PodTrack P4 is actually a recording device that facilitates both remote and in-person recording. Anyway, on we go. I've managed to rouse you from your sick bed this morning, on New Year's Eve no less, to record this year in review episode. So over the course of the next wee while, I wanted to catch up with you on your work at Strandhill in 2023, look forward to and share some stories about who we met and where we played in 2023, and look forward obviously to next year, which is a big year in Irish golf, and hopefully we'll get some travels out and about as well.
Very good, yeah. Okay.
So, first of all, just a little bit of lighthearted first topic for conversation. During the course of a recent Cookie Jar Golf podcast episode on the Strand course at Portstewart, you received a mention from either Sam or Tom. Not quite sure which one it was. It's incidental, really. I just wanted to give you the right of reply to check that you were happy with the description, Ali McIntosh, part-time golf architect. Does that sound about right?
It's not wrong. I am a part-time architect because I do other work as well. But it's through choice as much as anything, Shane, because it actually gives me more flexibility. So by doing other construction, project management, engineering work, I get to, in some ways, choose who I work with on the golf site. I don't have to go chasing jobs that don't interest me. So it's correct from that point of view. I think, I was put next to Des Giffen as a teacher, so I'm a part-time architect, but I'm a qualified golf course architect through European Institute of Golf Course Architects. So, but it wasn't incorrect.
Just picking up on Des, obviously he was the school teacher that turned his hand to designing the Strand course at Portstewart. The result he's ended up with is pretty exceptional, given the fact that obviously he's a golfer, a half-decent golfer, but I think that's his very first and only construction project or design project.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the history. There was a front nine that Des did, wasn't it? Yeah. So I haven't looked into the history of Portstewart. And I know actually Ross McMurray's in there from EGD at the moment doing some work or planning some work anyway. The front nine at Portstewart is spectacular. It's through wonderful dune land. It's got great holes. It's maybe missing a little bit of finesse in the detailing, which is sometimes what you get with a first time or a non-full. I won't say non-full-time because I've just called myself a part-time. But, it's sometimes what you get with an amateur golf architect, I suppose, is a little bit of lack of finesse in the detailing. And that's probably what you've got at Portstewart. And it's not much, though. It can be, little improvements in mowing lines, green detailing, some little bunker detailing or placement, and that's all that's needed to really elevate a course like that. But the holes are fantastic. He's routed it beautifully through the front nine, and the dunes, as we all know, are, I won't say second to none because I've worked down in Carn, but second to Carn.
But I guess riffing off something we'll be talking about later on, are they the best golf dunes in the world?
Down in Belmullet?
No, Belmullet, I'm obviously that comment.
Trump Scotland is obviously the best dunes in the world.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
But we will get to the second course in Balmeedy at some point over the next wee while. Listen, that first topic was really just me having a bit of fun at your expense.
Oh, of course,
apologies for that.
Not at all, no.
Anyway, the worst kept secret in golf came out during the year. Portmarnock obviously potentially in the mix for open road inclusion, despite Mr. Slumber's protestations to the contrary in addressing a question posed by Jeff Shackelford. I think it was at the Open in St Andrews. So step one appears to be hosting the Women's Amateur in 2024, which is slated for Portmarnock this coming summer. I believe there's parallel conversations with the Irish government ongoing. Knowing the club and the site as you do, what do you think these discussions are focused upon?
Well, I obviously know the club and I know the site. I'm no more close to these discussions than probably you or anyone else is. I imagine they're primarily focused on the infrastructure getting into the course and the support that would be needed to host such a tournament, which of course is huge. Transport, logistics, entrance road, car parking, all of that kind of thing. So that's where I would imagine it is. Any tournament of this size, whether it be golf, whether it be any other sport, we know needs government and infrastructure backing. So that must be where all the conversation is at the moment. I don't think there's too much needed to the golf course itself.
So how have your fellow members greeted the news that an Open in the future may be forthcoming?
I don't know. Well, I think most people are excited. You would be excited. There's always an element of people that don't want any change whatsoever, and it does come with change. I'm not talking to the golf course. I just mean, to what the membership's rights, I suppose, particularly in the year coming up to it. It will take change, I think, to the course. We'll wait and see about that. Not a huge amount, or it shouldn't be a huge amount, because Portmarnock has always been an obvious open venue. It really it's really there for that kind of tournament. It's a huge site. It's got tons of space. So there shouldn't be a huge amount of change needed to the course. But
and again, I understand crystal ball gazing and what revisions, if any, would you make to the course in advance of an Open Championship?
Well, you know me, Shane. With a course that's as revered as Portmarnock, and it's had, its routing, the skeleton of its routing has been there since the 1920s. There were changes made in the 1920s. It's obviously 1890s. The only significant change since then, the 8th and 10th were moved from a 1930s plan in the 50s. And the 6th hole, when the third nine was built in 1969, the 6th hole moved out of an existing corridor for the second half of the hole into the corridor now. But in essence, the skeleton of the routing has been the same since the 15th hole was introduced in the 1920s. So with every classic course, for me, you look at less is more, first of all. So you look at doing the minimum. And as I said earlier, I don't think Portmarnock needs anything to challenge the best pros in the world. Where changes could be needed, and again, I'm not party to this at all, is you need sometimes to think first and foremost about logistics of spectator flow and the infrastructure getting around the course. So potentially something could come from that point of view. I don't know. I'm speculating. I hope not, or the less the better, as I said to you earlier. So I really hope not. And if there are small changes needed, I hope they can be very temporary for the Open. So, there's usually a middle position that can say, well, we need to make these temporary changes now. So let's wait and see.
So maybe moving on to the architectural side of your part-time job.
Yeah.
You were involved down in Strand Hill during 2023. What little project or what big project did you do down there, and what's still left to do?
Well, Strand Hill has been a wonderful place to work. I've been working down there since 2016. It's been a slow renovation through choice of the golf club, through choice for a couple of reasons. I think you can argue that doing work quickly in big phases is actually more cost effective, but not if cash flow is an issue, right? And for a lot of these smaller clubs, cash flow is the primary issue. They can only afford so much per year on capital development or construction works. In addition to that, what we do down in Strand Hill to make sure that we're giving value for money and spending money wisely is that Jason Kelly, who's the course manager down there and a great course manager at that, he manages the growing. So his team will be doing the sodding if we're doing any of that and growing in. So if we were to do a huge phase down there, that wouldn't be viable. We need to bring in extra labor to do a lot of that finish sodding work and all the rest of it. So that saves money itself. We've made a load of changes down to Strand Hill over the years. We've still some to make over the next 3 or 4 years, I would say. So I would say it's about a 10 or 11 year project from beginning to end. Very happy with the way it's gone. This phase in particular was the biggest one we've done to date. We had some sports grant funding, which helped us. So we did a lot of work around, well, we've extended the 10th green to the right, built it into the dunes, tied it in that way, put a couple of bunkers in. We've worked the entire first 100 yards of the 11th, new tees, new shaping down to a big cross bunker into a natural dune, tied it into the dune on the left. So that's much more dramatic now. It's really, really happy with the way that's turned out. The 12th extended the back of the green, the whole dune at the back of 12 and 11. 13 egress we've redone. We've put in a new practice chipping green, and we've re-landscaped all around the clubhouse front and side. It was kind of ugly vegetation there, very not in keeping with the landscape. So we've just pulled that out and reshaped it as dune land effectively. So that's what we've been doing. It was about 6 or 7 weeks work.
You had mentioned to me previously about a desire to investigate a little bit of additional land that they had. There was a question mark as to whether or not they could use it. It's special area conservation,
SAC, yeah, which is European designations.
Any movement on that?
No, in fact, that really halted us. So whilst I've been working down there since 2016, we were working with the National Parks and Wildlife and Sligo County Council on that land, and it delayed us doing certain bits of work because that would have come with a resequencing. At the moment, we've decided that despite it being a very environmentally sensitive plan, I was very specific about that. We were really just mowing out land on a less sensitive area of the dune land. It was only an extra 1.5 acres. We've decided, at the moment to pause that and to finish off the golf course where it sits. So I'm working within the existing acreage, I guess, of the golf course at the moment. So
I guess that engagement process is pretty extensive in terms of the time required to engage with the council and the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and you probably need a champion in there in terms of whether or not it's doable or not.
Yeah, generally you're hitting your head against a brick wall if you're trying to do anything in a special area conservation. Sometimes it's difficult for the authorities to understand where one proposal is very sensitive and very caring to the land versus another proposal that isn't. So I found it a little bit disappointing that we couldn't move forward, or we can't move forward at the moment with what's proposed. We showed how it would actually help the dune land in many ways, and it would help some of the flora and fauna in there, just through management. Some of that land at the moment isn't being managed; it's being trampled through from the public. So, we could have managed it in a much more sensitive way. It's tough, It's tough in the end. You tend to need a lot more reports and consultations, and it comes with money. And Strandhill Golf Club don't have the money to just keep on doing that, ad infinitum.
Obviously, your other labour of love down in that particular neck of the woods is Kern Golf Links out in Belmullet. Don't think you were doing anything in 23, but I believe there may be plans afoot for 24.
Yeah, I've been back down a couple of times in 23. Jerry and Fiona down there who manage it do a wonderful job. They look after everyone. They have a huge international interest. They occasionally get some philanthropic investments there. So, in fact, they had one recently from a gentleman who paid to put paths down, right? So, all of the grass network of paths, they haven't got the money down there to irrigate, so you really can't survive with a grass network of paths. So they've been putting quartz down. I'll need to get back down and have a look at that to make sure that it's in the right areas. I was down once just to give a little bit of advice. But the plan, I think, through the end of 24 into 25, I've put a master plan together, or I'm putting a master plan together for them, is to redo some of the tees. The tees have shrunk in size. They've lost a little bit of their shape. And they've lost a little bit of their flatness as well. So some of them need redone from that point of view. And to do a full bunker renovation or redesign of the 27 holes. So I think between those two areas, and we're still working on signage because, as you know, they're running the two courses simultaneous down there, which does make a little bit confusion with which way visitors are going. Then we've got quite a lot of work planned between the end of 24 and into 25, I think.
Cool. And obviously, Cairn had a successful 2023 golfing season, I'm assuming.
They did, as I understand it. Yeah, I think they had more visitors than ever. Their green fees are increasing. They had the Irish PGA there for the third year in a row, and people are really speaking highly of the new Wild Atlantic Dunes course, which, if anyone hasn't been to, they should, because from a dune perspective, you're just out there with 18 completely individual and wild golf holes, wild in a good way, So yeah, they're going from strength to strength. Hope it continues.
Excellent. So we'll draw you on to your travel in 2023 from a golfing perspective. I believe you started the year off pretty well with a trip to the USA. Where did you go and where did you play?
The USA, I was in a couple of times. I was in later in the year in the USA in North Carolina.
Beg your pardon, I've got that mixed up. But anyway, we'll work forwards to work backwards.
Well, I was in the USA. I was there for other work, so I just threw the golf clubs in. So I only played a couple of rounds, and I played at Tobacco Road, which I hadn't seen. So, I'd never been to North Carolina ever, so I haven't been to Pinehurst, and I thought about trying to get down to Pinehurst. I knew I only had a couple of days, and I decided, no, the two courses I really wanted to see more than anywhere were Tobacco Road, but Mike Strant's design, which is a public golf course, and was really bold. Yeah, I expected it to be bold, but everyone should go and see it, because it opens up your mind to what golf design can be if you just go for it, right? And then Old Town, which was a beautiful private course. I had I knew a member there who had played with it at Portmarnock, and it's been restored. It was Perry Maxwell back in the 1930s. It had gone under the radar because it's a little bit off the beaten track in Winston-Salem, until Corin Crenshaw came in and did a restoration / renovation, primarily a restoration, 10 years ago, and then again 2 years ago. And my word, it is just the most wonderful golf course. I think it's in the world top 100 now, and it's climbing. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be in the world top 30 or 40. There's no reason. It's just a fantastic golf course.
Sounds like you would recommend North Carolina as a golfing destination.
Well, from seeing those two, and then if you add in Pinehurst into that, obviously if you're fortunate enough to get the invite to Old Town, then yeah, I mean, we always knew it was a great golf destination. I hadn't been there, but it's a lovely place.
And you were, of course, over on I believe, maybe not a first-time trip to the English Gulf coast in Lancashire, so in and around Merseyside.
First time playing some of the courses there, which is why I wanted to go over, yeah, which is amazing that I hadn't been there before from a playing perspective.
Where did you play and what did you see?
Went over just for a long weekend. Played Birkdale, Hillside, Formby, Lytham, and then went down into Cheshire for Delamere Forest, which again was a real surprise, actually. Delamere Forest, it was great. Brilliant topography, really brilliant topography. So you compare it to it's not a straight heathland, but it is really, it's a heath / park course, but the topography is magnificent. So the golf holes themselves, huge variety. So it flies under the radar, very private club. And again,
a Fowler course, yeah?
Yeah. Again, because it's not in the kind of common tourist destinations where you go for groups of courses, maybe the Surrey Heathlands or whatever, less people visit it. But it's top tier stuff. It really is a top tier golf course. It could hold its head up high with any of the heathlands. It's
amazing when you've got good land. Good. I'm assuming it's sandy.
Yeah.
It makes life an awful lot easier.
Oh, for sure. But it also shows it's quite wildly undulating topography, and it just uses that really well. It just shows how golf holes that are designed up and over rolls as opposed to always through dune valleys or through valleys. Like I think there's a default with, particularly in the last 40 or 50 years, inland golf designers to just try and route holes through natural valleys or create containment mounding to the side, but take your holes up and over and through and round, and it makes for much more exciting golf.
Like, having been fortunate to see some exceptional sites over the course of 23, particularly in the UK, around London, I was a little bit jealous. One thing we don't have in Ireland is a preponderance or an abundance of good quality, interesting land for golf inland.
No, where were you again in Surrey? Because you went to Surrey, didn't you? You went for a Heathland trip.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a bit of playing. Actually, 2023 was the year of walking golf courses for me a little bit. Starting off with a great course tour with Mike Clayton, actually back here in Royal Dublin, actually back at the start of July. Actually, beg your pardon, I think the first walking tour was actually the Jemison Links out in Portmarnock with Paul McCanny, the general manager out there, and a site that I would know historically very, very well. They'd done so much work to it in terms of the revision that Jeff Lynch has done. I didn't know where I was when I was out in the middle of a golf course. Well, there's a tale in of itself. But I was fortunate in that I walked Sunningdale New and got a tour with Tristan, the general manager, who was very kind to afford me some time to bring me around. Also walked the back nine at St. George's Hill. Didn't see the front nine. I believe the front nine at St. George's Hill is even better.
They're both equally good. It's great golf course.
What a phenomenal site for golf. And I had the absolute and unmitigated pleasure of joining Ryan Nodes at the Addington my last day in London. Didn't get a chance to play. I was invited to play the place, but I was kind of a little bit golfed out at that stage and decided to plonk myself on the couch in the bar and watch the Women's Open from Walton Heath. But yeah, it's been a good year for walking golf courses. But like the site, I mean, the Addington, St. George's Hill, even West Byfleet, I mean, wonderful sites.
They're very good. And to your point, it's sandy inland soil, good topography. That's 50%, more than 50% of the battle before you start looking at who your designer is and what they can do with the land. If you have the land in the first place, you're halfway there. And so, you said earlier, Ireland doesn't have much of that land. If we did, and it was fresh, we probably wouldn't be allowed to develop it anyway now. But we don't. We don't have a huge amount. There are courses out there. Like I'd love to get my hands on it. It's a terrible way to say it, but I'd love to go down to Carlow and try and help them out. Because the Carlow is just my favourite inland
Just a
course.
question on that. I mean, like Carlow, I obviously dipped into Hawtrey's book on Simpson over the course of 23. And actually, Carlow is obviously one of the four. But the other one that I didn't realise was Kilkenny. I also walked Kilkenny. I don't know how much. You can sort of still see some of the Simpson corridors. They redid the greens in the 80s or 90s, USGA specs. And the bunkers were done on top of that. So there's probably not a huge amount of stuff left there. But in saying that, like Carlow, to my mind, is, and I guess maybe just for listeners, how would you contrast the land that Carlow was on versus Surrey Heathland? Because I don't think it's quite the same sort of setup. It's more gravelly and esker as opposed to.
It is, but it's free draining. There's sand in there. In the end, it is a sandy site. It was Fred G. Hawtrey, which is Martin Hawtrey's grandfather, with Taylor that first designed it. And then Tom Simpson and Molly Gourley came in the mid to late 30s. So it's got a huge design history. And the routing of it is just magnificent because in essence, and you never really realise this, but in essence, it's one central hill with routing in, round, across, sideways and all the rest of it. And you just don't realise that it's that simple a landscape because they use land in every way. There's reverse camber, dog legs, there's, up, sideways, there's over, there's knob to knob par threes. And it's just the most wonderful golf course. I think I have it as my favourite inland course in Ireland anyway.
I'd second that particular nomination.
But it could do with a bit of tender loving care. One of the amazing things about it is Simpson, as was his wont actually, didn't have any. There's only one. There was only, unless it's changed in the last few years, but there was only one hole with fairway bunker on it, which is the 10th, which was a kind of more modern construct anyway.
That wasn't the Simpson hole.
That wasn't the Simpson hole, yeah. And what I think, or this is me speculating, but it seems pretty obvious to me, what I think happened over the years is the membership or whoever planted copses of trees down elements of the fairway almost to tighten it up, probably because there wasn't any fairway bunkering there. And, that's taken away a bit of the character of the site because it has got this open prairie, even though it's not heath, this open prairie heath kind of feel to it. So I think, some sensible tree clearance or tree management with rebunkering. And when I say rebunkering, I don't mean redesigning necessarily the bunker scheme, although probably one or two could be added in. I just mean giving it a little bit of aesthetic and drama, really, because they've lost their shape and they've lost their impact. And then recapturing, I would imagine, some of the greens sizes, because the greens seem to have shrunk in places. Now, I don't know what the subsurface of the green is, whether some of that could just be recaptured through mowing. I would imagine some of it would need to happen through reconstruction as well. But if you took those three elements, you could really elevate Carlow up another level, and it could be considered as Ireland's heathland. It's equivalent to the English heathlands.
So, Ali, end of 2024, most recently, you were over in Aberdeen for Christmas, visiting friends and family, and took a trip down memory lane to some dunes that quite closely. What did you find, and what can you tell us?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Aberdeen. So when Trump announced his first golf course, I was obviously hugely interested. So part of growing up in Aberdeen for a lot of people was going down to Balmedy. There's a particular kind of national car park and beach there where, national heritage site where we used to always just run up and down the dunes as kids, run along the beach. So it always interested me. So when he built his first course, I was lucky enough to walk that through construction with Caspar Kraubel, who was working for Martin Hawtrey at the time, and saw that come to fruition. I was particularly interested in the second golf course, which has just got planning permission in that obviously opened in 1913, the first one. The second one has just got planning permission in 2020, and they've just started constructing it quite below the radar. Not a lot has been said about it. And the reason I'm even more interested in that one is because the dunes to the south of the existing one, which is right where everyone walks and plays, like right on the edge of the public car park, these golf holes will go down to. So 6 of the golf holes go down through this great dune land to the edge of the public car park, and then 12 of them are more inland on kind of flat land that'll have to be created dunes.
Sorry to cut across there. I know there'll be some of our friends over in the UK wondering out loud what happened to that local farmer who became, I think at one point, didn't he become the Scotsman of the year in 2014 or 15? Yeah. Is he still there? He's still there. Or I thought he was kind of north. He was northwest of the whole thing.
He's in a slightly different area. Yeah, he's there close to the second course though, but he's still there. So so that both courses route around his farm. But the dune land for the new course is for the 6 holes, which I think were going to be 6 holes 8 to 13, is just as spectacular as the original course. So I went wandering out there for a Christmas or a Stephen's Day walk.
Well, God bless the right to roam.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? We went out just for a walk. I went out because I was specifically interested to see it. But there were hundreds of people out for a walk who had probably no interest in the golf course, but they were walking over land that they've already started to to shape or to rough grade and to mine some sand, some golf holes in. So, for me, it was a little bit disappointing to see in some ways.
Not knowing what was there previously, and you were kind enough to share a picture or two with me, that seems like am I correct in saying like that picture that has taken the big chunk out of the dune ridge, that presumably was a dune ridge at one point, and that's now a sandpit?
Yeah, a bit like the original course, there was a huge sand dome on this area of links land, which when we were wee kids used to feel like, you called it Sahara because it used to feel like you were walking just across this big desert. And some of the holes are going to go over that. So it was all open sand already, or a lot of it was open sand. But there's been some pretty severe cuts into the dunes. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is just severe cuts to create hole corridors. And the other seems to be severe cuts to mine sand to move to the inland portion of the site to create dunes, because the inland portion of the site is actually quite wet. It's low-lying and quite wet.
How challenging, given the fact that there's essentially two distinct areas there for the second course, how challenging do you think it'll be to shape and make the flatter areas fit with the dunescape?
Very challenging. So I think it'll be interesting to see. And Martin's doing the work again. I'm not sure who the builder is, whether it's Saul again. I'm actually unsure. That to me is where you will actually, you can build in dune land and do a pretty good job of it, right? Detailing can be questionable, whatever. As soon as you start to try and marry a dunescape, a natural dunescape, into a created one, that's where the real detailing and the real skill will come into his design, the people he's got working for him and all the rest of it. So it will be interesting to see what he comes up with, because that isn't easy. We'll see how he goes.
I know Mr. Trump has always expressed a desire to have a second course there. It doesn't seem to be, and I could be wrong, it doesn't seem to be a money-making organisation in terms of the standalone golf in Trump golf in Aberdeen. I mean, I was only there once, and there's no one in the car park.
I don't know. I don't know how they're doing financially, to be honest, although there's been a bit of the press about it. But and I also don't know where the current plans of house building and hotel building are, which was
talk about a nursing home or
I don't know,
aging care or something like that.
I don't know, but obviously the original master plan had 900 houses or whatever, and another huge hotel. He's got the McLeod Hotel there, which was the existing house, and that's a lovely spot. But we're going to build a big grand hotel as well. So I don't know how any of that's coming along, or whether it's planned or not. The golf courses on their own, I can't imagine make money. It has, though, brought Aberdeen as a proper destination now, I think, because you have, as a links destination, you have Royal Aberdeen, Cruden Bay and Mercer. 3 really, really good golf courses. Royal Aberdeen, Cruden Bay especially. Great courses. But it just wasn't quite enough to draw people from far and wide to Aberdeen as a extended destination. Whereas I think once you added the Trump course in, the original Trump course in, that really did Aberdeen has really become a proper golf destination. People can say, I need to go away for a long weekend or a week golfing. Where am I going to go? And sure, they're going to choose Fife or they're going to choose East Lothian, but Aberdeen is a pretty good choice as well now. So I think the Trump course has really added that as a destination. We'll see what the second one does. And how good is the second one going to be? Well, it's certainly got some great landscape for 6 holes. Whether they make the most of that or not, we'll wait and see. And then the big question is how they shape the 12 other holes.
Any idea when it's due to?
No, I don't know. I'm not sure, actually. It wasn't really even clear there was no plan on site. It wasn't even clear how quickly they were going. It was potentially that they just started constructing it to stay within planning regs because they got 2020, the planning permit, and they needed to start within 3 years. Maybe it's a slow build. No idea, to be honest.
You were asking me about about course walks, and I did mention briefly Mike Clayton's visit to Royal Dublin in July. I was very pleased to get an invitation to go for a wee little walk. But obviously, you joined me at least once, if not twice, in 23 out with the new bunkers in Dollymount. First of all, with your Irish golfer hat on, I suspect, obviously having hosted Mr. Markham as well, can maybe expect one or two notches up on the rankings list. But if it was, and look, the reason for Mike's visit was obviously to see the new bunkers bedded in, but also to explore some ideas for a master plan that we've asked CDP to prepare for the members to consider. And obviously that's as much to do with what you would do as to what you shouldn't do, if you like, just to obviously set a direction in trying to try and develop Royal Dublin into the best example of Royal Dublin it can be, rather than trying not to be something else. I'm going to ask you a question, and please feel free to dodge it if you see fit. But with that particular process in mind, if you were part of the Brains Trust, the CDP, what might you suggest as areas for development, or something that you might look at in relation to the golf course out there in Dollymount?
It's an interesting question. I think, I think first of all, you talked about rankings. We all know rankings is, there's a high element of subjectivity in there. I'd like to think there is some kind of collective objectivity as well, but it is primarily subjective. I've always been a fan of Royal Dublin. I think it's sitting a little bit low in the current rankings, particularly because the course had been managed so well over the last few years. When I first saw the drone photographs of the bunkers, I was a little unsure, actually. That was the first I was looking at it going, not too sure. And this is almost the opposite way to the way we were talking about earlier about some golf courses. Then I got back to the golf course, played it with you, and I really saw the improvement in the bunker scheme, down in the way the course played, which is strange. Quite often you look at drone photographs and that's what really sells a course. This time it was actually down on the ground playing the holes. I don't know, it comes back to sometimes people review courses by looking at a plan and they go, look, the bunker scheme looks good on plan, complete aerial. You have to see how it plays and how it looks down at ground level, because that's how you see the golf course in the end. There probably is an ideal elevation. But anyway, back to your question, right? I thought the bunkers have improved the golf course. There's no doubt about that.
Somebody said to me recently that we've made it easier. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
No, not at all. It depends what you're trying to do. Everyone seems to think you need to make things harder. I think when you're rebunkering a course, like I've always had the same things thrown at me in work that I've done. It's when you're rebunkering a golf course, someone just picks on an individual bunker and say, you've made this little bit easier. But you've got to look at it in terms of the overall scheme. Some things you're making harder, some things you're making easier. You're just trying to make it more interesting. You're trying to make the mental side of shot choices become more to the forefront with every part of the golf round. So you'll find that elements have tightened the course up and elements have opened the course up. That's the usual way.
But I guess the other side of it is, that presupposes that the golf course wasn't too difficult in the first place. And second of all, as Bobby Jones used to say, give the weaker golfer room to hang themselves, so they can actually go and avoid the trouble they want. The amateur golfers at the end of the day,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you have to do that. But on the flip side of that, or you could say it's the same side, I also I really dislike when bunker schemes, particularly fairway bunkers, are just put at what's seen to be standard turning points, 260 to 290 yards. You've got to use the natural landscape, and you've got to have variety. First of all, on a links course, wind makes a huge difference. What's the point putting everything 260 to 290 yards when you have a 30 mile an hour wind behind you one day and into you the next day? And the other side is, it's actually nice to create the occasional challenge for the weaker hitter. Have the odd bunker at 210. Have the odd bunker at 320, which actually catches a second shot sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess it's there's so much variability, particularly in terms of links weather in these isles, and also understanding, as you said, that all bunkers aren't necessarily there for everybody, or certainly
Yeah,
not
of
on the
course.
particular shot that they might have been considered for, if you like.
That's right, yeah. I had a story. We were building a bunker down Strand Hill, and it was at 300 yards on a 370-yard hole. And as I was building it, I was in there one day, and the course was closed, and two gents walked past. Or the hole was closed. Two gents walked past, and I could hear them talking to each other. And he said, "Why are they putting a bunker in there? No one will ever go in that." And I was there again the next day when that hole was back open. I was just walking around, and I saw the same gents again, and he put his second shot into the bunker. And he said to his guy, "I just said yesterday that no one would go in that, and look at me." And it gave me a little bit of a chuckle, the coincidence in it anyway,
It was just fortuitous that you were there the second day to see it.
Yeah, exactly. But let me go back here to the Royal Dublin, if you don't mind, because I didn't get to your question, which, and I hope I don't
wouldn't be like you.
I hope I don't cause offence to anyone here. What would I do at Royal Dublin? And this is just me being open and honest, is I think the surrounds to the greens could do with a little bit of almost simplification. They're a little bit over fussy. They are mounded and swaled at a few yards off the green before disappearing back out into the natural grade. If they were reshaped back to natural grade and given the proper scale, I think on a lot of holes out there that would actually, maybe 90% of people don't see that, wouldn't notice it anyway, but it would actually tie the greens back into the natural landscape a little bit better, I think.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So, apropos your writing and rankings in work in 2023, and you said to me earlier on that you've written nothing. So, the first question is kind of a bit redundant then, so isn't it?
No, I haven't. I don't think I have written anything this year.
So, I understand, obviously, you're on the Irish Golfer magazine ranking panel. There's a new ranking due in 24, is that right?
They do it once a year, yeah. I haven't been in touch with John or Peter, so assuming he's going to give me a call, then it's usually January. So we'll meet somewhere in January for a day or two.
How long are you on that particular panel?
Since John and Peter started up, obviously there was the history with Golf Digest Ireland, and then, so I don't know, what, 2015, something like that, 2015, 2016.
And who else is on the panel with you?
Kevin's on it, Kevin Markham, John Kelly.
John's the director of golf in the island.
He is now, yeah, he is. He moved there from Malahide. Great player. Then we have Maria Dunn.
She was a serious amateur golfer in her time. She turned pro one point. She definitely played in the.
She's looking after the.
She played the Vagliano Trophy at one point. She actually may have captained the Vagliano Trophy.
She's captaining that, yeah. And we have Ken Carney, who's obviously a great player in his time and a course architect as well. Damien McGrain, he brings that European tour aspect and view to the way we're doing it. And then with Peter and John sit on it themselves. I hope I'm not missing anyone. I'm sure I am missing someone. There's usually about 8 or 9 of us sitting on it.
That process involves a couple of days of just arguing?
Yeah, that's why I like it. I'm not really, as we've talked about, rankings are very subjective. But, sending your rankings into a nameless face or a magazine editor doesn't really why I enjoy it is because we sit down and we discuss golf courses, because there's only 8 or 9 of us, so we discuss around a table and argue and debate and laugh.
And do you use how do you again, any system, as you say, there's a touch of, well, not just a touch of subjectivity in terms of trying to collate the collection of opinions from 8 or 9 people. Do you score it? Well,
normally there's a score. Actually, the way I think any magazine that goes on scoring,
Sorry, I beg your pardon. What criteria do you use? Is probably the.
I can't quite recall the 5 criteria that we use. I need to look that up again. But in reality, those criteria can blend into one anyway. You're just looking at the overall picture. So again, when you have a Golf Digest or something and they say, well, we mark, design out of 20 and we do this and we do that, people in their own heads might do that, but they readjust to put the course in the order that they think it should be anyway. So the better way of doing it is just to use your own skill of judgment of what's a better course than something else. So what we actually do with Irish Golfer is we sit down and we take it in blocks of 5 or 10 from last year. And, and then we'll look at courses further down the line that might have done work or might be improving that can be considered in that. So we'll get the top 10 down to a 16 or 17 or 18. And we'll discuss all of that before voting ourselves. And then we'll do that as we go down from 1 to 100. And that can take ages.
I read you had an interesting reply to somebody on Golf Club Atlas over the last couple of days, talking about the sum of the parts of a golf course rather than featured holes. I'm just interested to get your thoughts on how important it is that a golf course makes sense in terms of fitting together, as opposed to be seen as 2 or 3 outstanding signature holes or whatever it might be, showstoppers, if you like.
I think there's 2 sides to it. I think the first side is primarily routing, right? And, if you've grown up in Scotland or Ireland or the UK, and if you've grown up on links courses, but primarily if you've just grown up playing golf, you're used to highly walkable golf courses. We all walked. Most of us still do. And a highly walkable golf course is one where green to tee transitions are relatively close, where you can get round relatively quickly. Unless you've played a lot of kart golf in the US, you don't realize that a lot of the modern courses in the US have actually just been built with like 600-meter transfers between green and tee because everyone uses a cart.
Well, also the other side of that is they've got to put the houses somewhere.
They did have that for a while. They've moved slightly away from that. But yes, that was absolutely, the real estate model was absolutely there. I think routing, so back to your question, right? 2 sides to it. The first side is routing. So when you're routing a golf course, if every architect has a different list of priorities. They haven't written down the list, but in their own head, they prioritize something more than something else. It's all compromises in the end. If you're routing a golf course and you're stuck on one fantastic golf hole, but you can't get the jigsaw of 18 to work together, it can have huge knock-on effects to the overall product. So sometimes you have to give away that great hole for the sake of the 18 to get a course that flows together beautifully, that works together beautifully. I've said it on GCA, but I always think of it as like music analogy is a great album. An album where there's no filler, an album where the experience is the 45 minutes of that music as opposed to a 3-minute hit in the middle of it. So I think routing is the first thing. Don't get stuck on a fantastic hole if it's going to mess up 5 or 6 of the other holes in the golf course. So I think that's one thing. And I think the second thing is the feel of the golf course, the look and feel of it. So yes, you always design the best holes you can. Of course you do. But don't go supercharged on one hole where the rest of the course feels completely different. Try and make the whole thing move from one spot to the next spot and feel the same in that way.
So what you're really talking about there is sense of place and a fit.
Yeah, I think so.
With the surrounding and just being aware of what the piece of land is rather than trying to turn it into something it isn't.
I think absolutely. It is. It's sense of place. It's making the golf course feel of itself. And every golf course should feel different. And it's important. It's important the 18 works, if it is an 18-holer, that it works together. But there's always exceptions. Of course there's always exceptions. You don't pass up building a great hole if it doesn't have that much of effect on something else, or you have to compromise. And that's why every bit of golf course design is realizing that the pros are more than the negatives. in your options.
Cool. So do you anticipate any movers this year in the rankings list, or
in the Irish Golf? Well, I suppose to your point, right?
I suppose you've got a bit to consider. There's been quite a bit of work ongoing.
You've got your big work is Royal Dublin has primarily been the bunker scheme so far. We'll see what happens over the coming years, but that's definitely work. Portmarnock Links was interesting. I know you went out there. I think you were talking about it earlier, but you met with Jeff as well, or you had a podcast with Jeff?
Haven't yet. It was due, but unfortunately, a couple of other podcasters have got there first. So maybe just cool the jets and wait to hear what they're doing for phase 2, and then maybe do it then. Just there's no point in overdoing the content.
No, of course.
Fintan and indeed Moira and Paul were very kind to give me some time and obviously give me a tour and a play. And it's one of those things, knowing the site as I do or did do, I suppose. You know, the first time you see what they've done, it was quite arresting, I suppose. Certainly the brief that they were after has been hit. I suspect I'm not the target market in terms of what they were doing. So, but it kind of, the more you see it, the more you get used to it.
He's put a lot of design into it, if that makes sense, right? Do you know, like I'm not saying it's over designed. That's not what I'm trying to indicate, but it's designed, right? You know, he's put artistry into the holes for sure, and there's some really cool stuff there that he's put in. So it's interesting. I'm assuming that all of the panelists will have gone to see Portmarnock Links. I went with Kevin actually, and we met Fintan pretty early on. I know the 17th hole hasn't been done yet, but we saw that shaped in. So there's Portmarnock Links, Druids Glen, of course, where Jeff was as well. And that is much improved. The bones are very much the same. There hasn't been a huge amount I thought there could have been a bit more tree clearing, but the bunker scheme, much more artistic, looks good. The greens and the green surrounds, an improvement for sure. So it's definitely elevated the golf course at Druids Glen.
And that was Jeff with Peter
McAvoy. Yeah.
Who, funnily enough, I believe is big into his conditioning.
I don't know actually. Yeah,
I'm repeating that from somebody that heard him say it at the opening.
Peter's been involved in some interesting stuff over the time. He did Rathsala with Christie Jr. and Peter also did greens out at Beaverstown.
New Forest, I think he did as well.
New Forest, yeah. The greens at Beaverstown were kind of a cool set, you know. Peter plus his architect. I don't know who his architect was at the time. I can't quite recall, but you know, he's definitely into not pushing the envelope, but it's not boring design. He puts in some interesting design, Peter.
So you foresee a few potential movers and shakers then, so in relation to
I think so. Those are the 3 big renovations. We'll see what else is going on. There's always some that are just trending up and some that are trending down.
Would you suggest more or less love for St. Patrick's Links at Rossapenna?
Don't know. It's interesting. Obviously, it's into the top 50 in the world now in the golf mag rankings. So, you know, it comes with a huge pedigree through Tom. It's a absolutely magnificent golf course. But there seems to be some varying opinions within Ireland. I don't know whether that's just because it's different and unusual to some people who haven't travelled as much. That can sometimes be the case. I just think it's a wonderful course. I haven't been up there this year. So
me neither. We need to rectify that in 24.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's the fairway undulations are. He's just Tom and his team, which was Eric and Clyde and Angela, did just the right amount there, and that's not always the case. I knew the land well, which was unusual. Looking at other, you know, when you look at other people's work, you don't usually know what the base land was very well. But I spent a fair amount of time up at Rossapenna, so I knew that land well. I'd walked that land myself, looking at the potential of it, and they did. I know we talked about this earlier in the year, or last year, but they did just the right amount of work. They didn't get anything wrong there, and that's the difference, I think, between Tom and his crew and one or two of the pretenders.
So, with a view to looking forward to travel plans for 2024, Mr. McIntosh, are you eyeing up anything in particular?
Yeah, yeah.
You're always eyeing something up.
Well, I have to travel to States anyway for non-golf stuff.
I'll get my little violin out.
Yeah. So I'm going to LA in March. So I'm going to hopefully throw the clubs in then for 2 or 3 days again of golf. I hoping to see LACC, which I haven't. I want to go and see Rustic Canyon, which is a public course up in Ventura, which was a Gil Hands design from, I don't know, 15 years ago. So I want to see Rustic Canyon, maybe Bel Air, if I have a third day up there.
That looks wild.
Yeah, it does.
That hosted the US Women's Am this year, didn't it?
I don't know. Did it?
That's maybe, Thomas design.
It is Thomas design.
Through the canyons and whatnot.
That's it.
And there's a lift on the 18th green. There's a lift back up to the clubhouse.
It could be. I don't know much about it. I haven't been. Well, I obviously know Tom Doak was in there as well, restoring what he could do. I don't think it was all restorable, but and then obviously LACC is somewhere that I want to see. I've seen Riviera before. I'd love to go back. I think Riviera is just a wonderful strategic masterpiece. But anyway, we'll see. So that's there. I was going to try and get to the New York area in September for a week. That's not planned in yet. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I probably do have 1 or 2 other States trips. So maybe I'll be able to throw the clubs in again then. So we'll see. Yeah, I think so. There's other things. We'll see. Things will generate themselves as the year goes on. I'll definitely want to go and see some other places. You were in the Netherlands this year, weren't you?
I was in the Netherlands.
I might throw the clubs in. I'll be crossing the Netherlands again. So I might.
And you know what? I'm kind of still in the middle of that golf series in the Netherlands. So if anybody wants to hear more about the golf in the Netherlands, just go back to episode 29 and you can fill your boots there. But Netherlands, I'm half eyeing up another trip to the Netherlands and pending a Belgian trip on as well. One of the lads I met over in Noordwijk, hello Chris, has suggested that maybe we go and take a look at some of the Simpson courses in Belgium. So that'd be good. That'd be interesting. Yeah, and I've got another mate coming over from Adelaide the end of June, start of July. So Kent, Linksland, and a bit of Heathland thrown in on top as well. So I'm sort of planning that out at the moment, but that looks like 5 or 6 days of half decent golf.
No, that would be great. Actually, I don't know if I'll get to see as many new courses in 24 as I did in 23. As you said, I was in Lancashire. Formby, as much as I love Birkdale and Lytham and Hillside, which are all great courses, Formby was a real standout for me. You know, it was a wonderful course. It takes you through very different topography and landscape, but it flows beautifully. So that was great. And then I went later in the year again. I played Beau Desert and Notts Hollandwell, magnificent Heathland course, and then JCB with Robin Heisman, the designer, who's a good friend of mine. So we had just the sunniest, most wonderful 36-hole day at JCB, and he's done a really good job there. It's like, because again, it wasn't on wonderful land. It was a bit like a lot of the heavy clay estate courses that we would have built in Ireland in the 90s and through the UK. It's just he's taken the design level to another level. You know, his design on that land is just a step up. So JCB is really, if anyone gets the opportunity, is really worth seeing.
Last couple of topics before we let you get back into the wind there, Ali. We've got a half decent summer of Irish golf in terms of amateur and professional events. We've the Amateur Championship at Ballyliffin, June 13th to the 22nd. We have the Women's Amateur at Portmarnock Golf Club between June 24 and 29. And the Irish Open is back on a links golf course, Royal County Down, in September 24. What do you think competitors can expect and indeed viewers can expect from looking at the events that will take place at Ballyliffin, Portmarnock and RCD?
First of all, the Ballyliffin getting announced for the amateur was, well, in my opinion, quite a coup. Great, well done on them, because if you look at who has hosted the Amateur Championship over the years, every single one of them is an old, traditional golf club with tons of history, and Ballyliffin doesn't really have that history, So, to get announced for the amateur, also being outside of Britain and Northern Ireland, even though Portmarnock has previously held it, was a spectacular achievement. So well done them.
Well done, Sean Farron.
Yeah, well done. So really look forward to seeing that in Ballyliffin, because the amateur is great to watch. Obviously, the women's amateur coming to Portmarnock will be interesting, particularly for me. So I look forward to that. And then it's good to see the Irish Open back on a links course. You were doing a little bit of history digging, were you, to see how many times it's been held?
You often come across external commentators, particularly some of our friends over in North America, lament the fact that more links venues aren't hosting the Irish Open. So I looked back over the last 30 years, 21 times Parkland and only 9 times on the links. So they will proffer different arguments, such as it's a missed opportunity to market Irish links golf. At the end of the day, they're members' courses. There is a hosting fee. The disruption for member access and crowd damage can be, a disincentive. And ultimately, when you distill down the latent inbound demand that we are fortunate enough to have in terms of inbound golfers, there's actually an opportunity cost in hosting it, I suppose, in relation to foregone green fees.
Yeah, that's true. So you're right. Maybe, not everyone's that interested in the Irish Open, but it is great to see it back at
100%.
RCD.
Like it's 2015, I think, since the last time it was there. Soren Kjeldsen, actually, he bet Eddie Pepperell and somebody else in a playoff. And for the life of me, I forgive me if I can't remember the other golfer, but definitely Pepperell was beaten in the playoff. But yeah, Soren Kjeldsen, a man that can play in the wind.
Yeah. I think, well, of course, you've got Portrush. The Open's back at Portrush the year after again as well. So for the next 18 months, it really is going to be Irish links course front and centre in the international golf calendar, which is fantastic. RCD, I think they restricted the fans, didn't they, in RCD?
Yeah, there was a cap on it, all right.
There was a cap on it, same way as there was a cap at LACC there just for the US Open last year. So it'll be interesting to see, if they go with the same cap or whether there'll be an increased limit there, just to protect some of the flora and fauna around the place, I think. So we'll see. But look, seeing Royal County Down on the television and that going out to an international audience, it's not as if the international audience doesn't know Royal County Down anyway, but it's such a beautiful links course, and we know the surrounds are so beautiful that it really, particularly if you get a little bit of decent weather, it really will film well. Let's put it that way.
Well, there are a few better sites than cresting the ridge on the 9th and heading back towards the Sleep Downard Hotel and the mountains and Mourne in the distance.
I know.
It's remarkable. In fact, it's over 20 years since I was up there, so I must get back myself.
Absolutely, yeah.
You said to me you haven't listened to any podcast pretty much, so there's no point of me asking you that question. What I will say is we got a couple of pretty interesting podcasts upcoming on Firm and Fast. I've as I said, got to finish off. There's 2 or 3 episodes left in the Dutch golf series. Ryan Notes has promised me some time to have a chat about JF Abercrombie and the Addington, which will be interesting. Should be able to get that done in the next couple of months. I'm planning another one with Jess Stiles from the Tom Simpson Society, having dipped my toe in the water again in relation to information in terms of Tom Simpson. There's one recorded pre-edit at the moment for Calvin Peete, a very interesting case study in relation to PGA Tour golf from the mid-70s onwards. Pat Ruddy tacitly agreed last August to have a chat with me. I've yet to make that particular follow-up phone call, which is due in the not-too-distant future. Returning listeners will know we generally finish episodes with some book recommendations. You've already proffered suggestions way back in episode 1. So this time I'm wondering, were there any particular golf books you read or came into possession of during 2023 that listeners may be interested in? If you haven't, I have an answer for that. But
No, not too many, actually. I'll tell you one that I just came across, which I haven't seen advertised much, and I can't remember the author's name. I do apologise. There was an Irish author. He must be self-published, because it's a little bit like Kevin Markham's Hooked. He seems to have travelled and he's done a review of all of the 18-hole golf courses in Ireland.
Sorry, I'm staring blankly at you.
Yeah, I'll need to. It's not going to help this podcast, of course, but I'll need to remind myself what the name of it was. He was on the radio the other day, so it came out of nowhere. So I might get my hands on that, because it's always worth looking at how people think about the lesser Irish courses. There's not many books that look at that, you know.
I've been fortunate enough. I books coming out my ears, actually, in terms of having half started to read something and then put it down and start to read something else. So for me, when I was over in Japan in Utrecht, I actually was given a present of the history of the Utrecht Golf Club, Japan. Now, it is in Dutch, but there are some really cool images, letters and communications with Colt and Copain and the builders and so on and so forth. The images in themselves are actually as compelling as the text.
And you haven't learned Dutch just to be able to read it. It wouldn't surprise me with you.
Not yet. We also had Richard Pennell on back earlier in the year with his Grassroots book. I've not only bought a copy of that, I've actually given a few away as well. So that's a really cool. People may have come across his @Pitchmark's Twitter handle. So he's posting away like Goodo every Sunday. I just got one this morning. And finally, The Serendipity of Golf, which is basically an exposition of golf in the Netherlands by a recent guest, Robin Bargman, who's one of Holland's. He's a golf historian in Holland. Really interesting. He goes back in an awful lot of detail. King David in the 10th century, and looks at the commonalities between Dutch and British society. Not suggesting, of course, that golf is the precursor to golf, but you read the book. He's not doing a Stephen Van Hengel on it, which he basically said golf was golf. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest there was at least a little bit of Dutch influence on.
Okay. You might get the backup in the Scotsman in me there. Good, though. Sounds interesting.
So you didn't read any books. That's fine.
I read a lot of books. I just steered away from golf books. You can have a bit too much of it sometimes.
Quite all right. It's always a pleasure to chat, Charlie. So look, wishing you and yours a prosperous golfing 2024. Thanks as always.
And to you, Shane. Look, good to chat to you. We'll be playing and seeing each other through 2024, and have a good one when it comes.
We certainly will. Thanks, mate.